My name is Susan Walter, and I wanted to share my near death experiences that I had as a very small child. The first one was at the age of 4, where I know from remembering the way I was dressed at the time that it was summer and I was laying on the couch. The blanket my mom put on me was so heavy I couldn't even move it. My mom told me later that my temperature was somewhere approaching 105 degrees. And at the time in rural Iowa back in the day, doctors actually still visited your home when you were very ill. And the doctor came to the house and examined me. After examining my parents and the doctor started to go to the next room. The odd thing that I thought at the time was I followed them, even though my body was still back on the couch, my consciousness followed them, but I was looking down on them. And one of the things I remember vividly is my dad was like 6'1", 6'2", so rather tall to a small child. And I remember specifically thinking, I was looking down on him and he didn't seem so tall anymore. But their discussion at that time in the next room was about if they were going to take me to the local hospital, which was, about 10, 15 minutes away, or to the University of Iowa hospital that was approaching an hour away. They did decide because of the condition that I was in that they needed to take me to the local hospital that was closer because I needed to have immediate life-saving surgery. And from there, I go completely someplace else. I would describe it as a garden, but everything just kind of glowed and glittered would be the best way I could describe it. And there was the first thing I really noticed was these massive, massive trees, bigger than any tree I'd ever seen before. And I would now equate them to similar in size to the redwoods in California. And there was this, wildflowers everywhere. There was little small animals, but it was all animals I was familiar with at the time, like rabbits and mice and snakes and I grew up on a pig farm, so there were pigs, and there were also all the animals were small animals, like newborn, like which was what I was very comfortable with. To be honest, I'm scared of cattle, even though my aunt, uncle, and grandparents just down the road from us had cattle, because partly by magic because their size. And then underneath one of the trees were 3 very large, at least to me, very large, very tall, even though the trees were so tall, even they couldn't reach the branches. These 3 beings I immediately recognized as not only being angels, but my angels. They were very, very familiar. They were old friends, so to speak. And that's, was very significant to me. But I remember like having a short conversation with them, but I don't remember what the conversation was about. And then it's like they were just trying to occupy my time by asking me if I wanted to see the world through the eyes of the animals. And I was very connected to animals at that time because if there was a nest of baby rabbits or mice or snakes or whatever, around the farm, I was notorious for being able to find their nest. And I would just very gently play with them, and then I'd put them right back exactly where I found them. So really all I remember about, seeing the animals through their eyes was really the different perspective of grass being, instead of, grass being this tall, it was all of a sudden seemed like it was this tall. So just a very different perspective to the plants and the grass around. I don't really remember much more than that from the very first experience. I don't remember waking up from the surgery and what that was like. I did have a second NDE at the age of 6, and this one was a little more significant, at least, or I remember more details. I remember being back in the exact same garden with the exact 3 same beings. And I remember asking them some details about things I was being taught in Sunday school at that time. And because a lot of things I was being taught just didn't make sense to me. And one of the things I remember asking was how long God's day was. Because to me, this God seemed very, way bigger than us, bigger than human beings. And it only made sense to me that God's day was longer than ours since God was so big. And I used to get in trouble in Sunday school for asking that question, but probably because they didn't have an answer. So I remember discussing those different things from Sunday school. And then again, I was asked if I wanted to see the world through the eyes of the angels or through the animals. And from there, it's like I went to more different animals that I was not as familiar with, including, eventually I was even swimming. And then I wasn't just swimming in a small animal. I was swimming, in a small fish or frog. I was swimming in this massive being that, I think it was probably, a whale or some other massive being in the oceans. But all of a sudden, then I wasn't swimming in the water anymore. I was swimming in space. And this is where things kind of got interesting as I look back on it, where then I was then shown like to me, I think of it as a moment of what is often referred to as the Big Bang. Because scientists now say it wasn't a bang, it was more of a tone, which I think is very interesting on the word that the Bible speaks about. But I'm hearing this, tone that's really loud and just totally encompassing. And then it's almost like there's an inhales and exhales taking place. And with each exhale, there's, all these souls coming from this central place where this tone and this light is coming from, and then there's an inhale where some of the souls go back in, and then another exhale where it, and this continues on for quite some time, these inhales and exhales where these souls seem to be being birthed and some choose to go back. And then I'm shown where I'm, in one of these early breaths that I see, I'm one of the souls that comes from this central light source. And it shows me being, pulled aside with two other souls and asked to be what I can only call, what they called a planet creator. And I'm going to be honest, I'm not fully wrapping my head around what that fully means. I'm still don't, even though that's been over 40 years now, but actually over 50. But from there, it's like the being or other soul that's asking us if the three of us would like to do this. We're shown on it's some sort of screen, but it's almost like it it was originally like rolled up like a scroll and then rolled out, bigger than like a computer screen, kind of like a large screen TV, but very thin, very transparent. But yet then these images are where we're shown what it would be like if we did take this role and what it would be like if we did not. And this seemed to go on for some time. But then the other two souls that I'm being shown this were also being asked to become planet creators, chose not to, and on to faster frequencies, faster dimensions, the angelic realm, whatever you choose to call that. And from there, because I did choose to take on this role, was then taken to, I wouldn't call it a school because when we think of school, there's desks and blackboards or whiteboards, and we're very restricted in that training. With this was just the opposite. It was very interactive. It had a lot to do with energy, with light, frequency. I even remember some sacred, what we now call sacred geometry. And I vaguely remember some of the other souls that were there, and they would be, some of the rather famous religious figures from our time, Jesus, Mary Magdalene, Buddha, Yeshua, Kuan Yin, and kind of the list goes on. It's like, there were a number of different beings and ones I'm not even familiar with. And they didn't have, and even I didn't have human form at the time. It's like we were just these balls of light and energy is the best way, or shapes of light and energy. This seemed to go on and on. I don't, how long, because time didn't exist in that time frame. And that's one of the distinctions between even say animals, angels, and spirit guides now is, they don't, angels have not taken on a physical lifetime. They have a kind of a human shape. That's when they show themselves to me, even today. But most of the time I see them as balls of light and energy and color, because even color is frequency. From there, I see, I remember waking up at my bedside was one of my grandmothers. And she's not realizing I'm awake yet, but I'm looking over at her and she's reading her favorite magazine at that time, which was National Geographic. And on the cover of the National Geographic was the Giza Plateau. And I remember, and this is how she realized that I was awake, was I remember asking her, where's the rest of them? Where's the rest of the pyramids? And I think it's interesting that just probably about 4 or 5 years ago, scientists or archaeologists have now discovered on what's referred to the backside, or I believe the west side of the Giza Plateau, they've found the foundation for more pyramids and more temples. Were totally and completely obliterated. All that was really left was the foundations buried in the sand. And one of the things that continues to impact me a great deal in my life was after this experience. Now, I don't remember for sure after the one when I was 4, because I was so young, but I remember specifically after the one at 6, those 3 angels that I met during my near-death experience, I continued to see and to see them all the time. And it really was several years after this experience that I realized I didn't see my own angel, or after several years after this experience, that not everybody saw their angels all the time. I really didn't understand that. I really, really struggled for a long time to be able to explain and share this experience with my parents, because number one, I didn't have the vocabulary as such a young child. I would talk about, when I was a snake, when I was a bunny, when I was a bird. And they didn't understand. And even the term, even if I had heard it, the term of near death experience didn't exist for at least another decade. So at one point, my father actually told me to quit telling these stories. So I quit talking about it after a while. And one of the things I've noticed throughout my life that, and I actually just realized this recently, that I had said for a number of years that I had a near death experience, but I didn't share any of the details about it until after my father's passing. So a part of me continued to not speak about it until he passed and was no longer present in my life, or at least no longer present physically. One of the ways that this has continued to impact my life all the years later is in 1997. One day I went to the grocery store and realized I wasn't seeing just my own angels anymore. I was seeing everybody else's. And at the time, I was a stay-at-home mom because I had 2 teenage boys, and I also had 2 toddlers. So it was, rather busy mother. But as soon as I was able, I went into meditation, started asking why. What was I supposed to do with this? And why me? And all these questions I think anybody would ask at that point. And it was very clear that I was to find a way to draw or paint in some way to share the images that I was seeing with people. And to be honest, I argued for like the first 6 months maybe even a little bit longer because, like, I was a busy mother. And one other fine, odd little detail, I had no idea how to draw or paint. I hadn't taken any art classes in my life other than ones back in high school. And, we all know we don't learn much from those. But, at the end of it, my high school art teacher pretty much told me not to bother. So even though I was fascinated by art and the different art mediums, partly because when I was, I think it was probably 9 or 10 in history class, I learned that I was born on or shared birthday with Michelangelo. Foolishly at the time thought that meant something. Obviously it did not. So all these years later, I'm trying to find a way to, portray these images that I'm seeing. And I started with watercolor because that was probably the closest to the way I see them. Because it's like seeing that ray of sunshine between the clouds. That's how transparent they are. So watercolor made sense, but I learned very, very quickly that watercolor is probably the most difficult art mediums there is. And I also needed something that, with having young children, that I needed something I could drop very easily right in the middle of something if I needed to, because I didn't have a lot of time to be drawing or painting these beings, and angels that I was seeing. So then after failing miserably with watercolor, I went on to pastels because I found the colors very easy to blend to help make it a little easier to be closer to what I was seeing. But, as time went on, I found out that I wasn't good enough with pastels to get the details that I was seeing. So I went to color pencil, which is what I still use to draw angels today. And I do have a couple of the drawings here. If you don't mind, I'm going to share with you a couple of them just so you get an idea of what. And you'll notice I don't see faces, never have. Even in my NDE, I did not see faces. And you'll notice almost all the angels that I draw, their arms are always outstretched as if they're ready to embrace or share energy in any way when you need it. Their wings is really what we call wings. So being made of light, don't need wings. The wings are what's kind of like their individual fingerprint, so to speak. That's what can be very unique with color and shape. And it still amazes me all these years that I've been drawing how different each one can be. But that just gives you an idea how it is I see the angels. But I've just always felt, and ever since then, have felt very, very connected to the angelic realms. They seem like very dear friends to me. So a lot of people ask me, well, how can I talk to my angels? And it's like, talk to them like they're friends. Talk to them on a daily basis. And the best way for them to be able to assist you is for you to ask because they need permission other than very dramatic things in our life. Like, if you're in a situation, a dire situation, they might be able to reach out and help. But, as a general rule, they need your permission to ask. And that by asking, you give them that permission. But, talk to them just like they're friends. There's times I've even had like a journal where I'd write letters. And sometimes that was just me venting. Sometimes it was me asking for assistance with different things. And sometimes it was just a way for me to release and share thoughts that I needed to let go of. And a lot of times I would just burn those pages after I was done. But they really are best friends. And everybody has minimum three, but the more you have, the more work you have to do. And that's the more lessons you're here to learn, the more experiences you're here to have. And everybody has one main guardian angel that's been with you not just this lifetime, but all of your lifetimes in physical form. And that isn't restricted just to Earth. That can be in other planets, in other solar systems, in other frequencies or dimensions. But their main role with us is to help us and keep us on track with those lessons that we chose to learn in this lifetime, those experiences that we have chosen to have. And it's like, the lessons that we might be here to learn is like, I know one of the big ones for me personally is about letting go and setting boundaries with people and not feeling like I need to do their homework for them, so to speak. So I've been put in situation after situation where I need to do that. So, yeah, if you're here to learn forgiveness, you're going to be put in situation after situation where you need to forgive until you get it, until sometimes we get that spiritual clue by four, is how I like to put it. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my story. If you have any questions for me, please reach out to me with the links below. Please take the time in your day to find a way to meditate, find some way to connect with spirit.